Organizational behavior, chapter 5, stress. Stress. Why are some employees more stressed than others? Types of stressors. How do people cope with stressors? The experience of strain. Accounting for individuals in the stress process. Summary. Why are some employees more stressed than others? How important is stress? Class agenda, application stress management, assessment, reducing stressors, providing resources, reducing strains. So when we go back, this is going back to the model that we saw, the integrative model of organizational behavior. We look at, the different outcomes for organizational mechanism, group mechanisms, individual characteristics, and then we see how that ties into individual mechanisms. And you see in the blue, you see stresses in there. We're going to talk about that in this chapter to let you know just how important that is. But you see it also can affect individual outcomes, job performance, and organizational commitment. So stress is a psychological response to demands that possess certain stakes for persons and that tax or exceed the person's capacity or resources. So if you think about this, do you want a stress-free job? Which jobs are more and less stressful? I guess if you ask that question, we all want a stress-free job. And reality is most people will not get that. There are always going to be some type of stress that's going to be associated with it. The key to it is actually knowing, are they unbearable? And ultimately, is it something that you can do? So let's look at here, jobs related to stress. If we look at it and we see, I won't read through all of those and stuff, but as you can see, when it looks at, you see the people who have the least stress, and then you see the professions with the least stress on them and the professions with the most stress on them. And you can pause and read through those if you like to, because it's actually very interesting, particularly if you see something up here you think that you may be interested in as a career option. Why are some employees more stressed than others? To understand what it means to feel stressed, it's helpful to consider the transactional theory of stress. This theory explains how stressors are perceived and are praised, as well as how people respond. So we look at the transactional theory of stress. As we see here, we see stress in the red. Primary appraisal is this stressful. Secondary appraisal, how can I cope? So when people first encounter stress, the first thing they ask, the primary appraisal that you go through is trying to determine, is this a stressful event? And if it is, your secondary appraisal is, how can I cope with it? So when you look at it and you see it's broken down, and you see stressors, hindrance, and challenge. You see work and non-work. So we're catching stressors multiple different ways. And everybody's different, so it depends on what type of stressors you're getting, how you're affected by them. But everybody's going to be a little bit different. But these are things right here. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list, but these are some of the things that shows up a lot when it comes to stress. So when we think in terms of stress, look at the stressors, the challenge stress. So when we see how much stress do you feel because of the following aspects of your coursework. So 1 is no stress. 5 is a great deal of stress. Average score is 16. So for individuals that actually do this, and if your score is 16, well above 16, then there might be some time to do some self-reflection or to actually speak with somebody to be under that level of stress, because that's not healthy, and we'll talk about that later. Hindrance stressors, the same here. 1, no stress. 5, great deal of stress. Average score is 12. Work stressors. So when we look at these work stressors, hindrance stressors, role conflict, role ambiguity, role overload, data hassles. Role conflict is when you have things where you have a job and you have a role, but you have things that actually is not consistent with that. So they conflict with that, but you've actually have these things assigned to you, or you're doing these things anyway. Role ambiguity is when your role is unclear. Subsequently, you are doing all types of things because your role is not defined, creating stressors. These are hindrance. Role overload. Basically, when you've got too much on you, you have a role and there's things you're supposed to be doing, but there's other things that get put on you as well. Some people may say, sometimes I feel like I've been dumped on these other things that other people don't want. Role overload. And daily hassles. This is just dealing with all the little stuff that just gets in your way. It's just, I mean, you got to do this, you got to do that, you have to do this. And at the end of the day, if you add it all up, these little hassles you've dealt with in the course of the day, it's ate up a lot of your time. So yeah, it's stressful because it gets you behind on doing your actual job. Challenge stressors. When you look at time pressure, pressure to meet deadlines. You got things you have to do. You have to get these deadlines met. And in a lot of cases and stuff, there are many professions where you have multiple deadlines, time pressure, things you must get done, or things that are time sensitive that has to be done in a certain way. So you don't have the luxury of saying, well, I'll get around to it or whatever. So you have that stress. Work complexity. How difficult is what you're doing? You may be actually doing something, the complexity of it, that's actually maybe too complex for you. Are you qualified and skilled enough to be doing that job, or is the complexity too difficult? And if it is, it can be a stressor. Work responsibility is you're doing things where, you have a responsibility to others. You do what you do, but it helps other people do what they do. So you have a responsibility, not only for yourself, but also to other people. Those are stresses because, what we don't want to do is let other people down. Challenge stressors. So if you look at demands from the family, for those who at some point in time, if you all choose to have families, of your own, or it's just to being a member of your current family, there are things you have to do for the family, particularly when you have significant others and children. There are certain things that you'll need to do. I mean, imagine you having a spouse and having to go to a PTA meeting, but you're still working because you're about to miss a deadline. That's a stressor. Personal development, things that you may do to develop you as a person. It may not be work related. It just may be some of the things you may do on your own outside of work. But, when you can't do those things, that's an issue for you as well. And positive life events. This is kind of living with the things. If you look at things like just getting married, having children, graduating, getting a degree. These are positive life events, but they're also stressors too. Hindrance stresses, work and family conflict. It's when you look at it, you're like, I'm needing to be somewhere, I'm needing to do something, but you can't be two places at once. You need to do something with the family, you need to do something for work, and you have a conflict. I cannot tell you how many times in the course of my careers where it happened to me. And it happens to a lot of people. And depending upon what careers you choose, that can be pretty significant. Financial uncertainty. Am I going to get laid off? Am I going to get a pay cut? Will I not get this promotion? I have another child coming, expecting. So, I really need this additional bump in pay and I hope that I get it. These things that come up. Negative life events. Death in the family. Divorce. Incarceration of a family member. These things are negative life events, but they do happen and they do affect us. So when you look at it, you can see the different the significance of the things, starting up here with death of a partner and then working its way all the way down to minor violations of the law. So there are a lot of stress you see on somebody. You see the ones that's more stressful than the others. How do people cope with stressors? Coping refers to the behaviors and thoughts people use to manage stressful demands and the emotions associated with those demands. So we're different. There are no two people alike, so we're going to cope different. Methods of coping. And then there's some things you can factor into it as well. But methods of coping, behavior versus cognitive, focus on coping, focus of coping, problem solving versus regulation of emotions. So here we see this. Examples of coping strategies. You see behavior, problem focused, and emotion. You see cognitive. You see right there. You see behavior is actually things you do. Cognitive is things we think, this is mental and emotional. The Lighthouse. The Lighthouse was a movie starring Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. And it was about two men, I think in the 1800s, who were at a lighthouse. And part of their job is to make sure that the light does not go out at night so it can guide ships in and keep them from running ashore. And in there, the lead character, Willem Dafoe, tells Pattinson's character that, one of the ways that best way for us to cope is to actually drink alcohol, dumb down the senses and null everything down. Well, what he found out his case is, realistically, during the course of the movie, what you found that they kind of became alcoholics, drinking a lot. But that didn't actually make things better. It made things worse. And then you saw suspicions arising between them, mistrust and conflicts and arguments. And there is ultimately ends up in a very bad way. But it goes to show you, when it comes to dealing with those type of emotions, you can't put a Band-Aid over them, because realistically, those are things that you have to get out. And for people who try to choose things like substance to engage in legal or illegal substances to try to numb the nerves or whatever else, it's really a bad idea. The experience of strain. Strain refers to the negative consequences associated with stress. So you have physiological, psychological, and behavioral strains. So when we look at the strain, you look at physiological strain. So you see all three of these actually can have a direct nexus to stress. So let's look at physiological strain. So we're talking about illness, high blood pressure, coronary disease, headaches, back pain, stomach aches. Psychological, you're talking about depression, anxiety, forgetfulness, cognitive dysfunction, not thinking clearly. Behavioral, alcohol, drug, teeth grinding, compulsive behaviors, overeating. So these all have, these are different categories, and you could have three different people who are going through doing the same job, and all three of them could be in a different category. One could be psychological, one could be physiological, sociological, and physiological, and one could be behavioral. And because they process it and they handle it different ways. But either way, none of those are good. And if you look at it, you see why they can actually take not a toll on just your physical health, but your mental health. So accounting for individuals in the stress process. Individual factors in coping with stress include behavior type A pattern, recovery, social support, instrumental support, emotional support. So when you're looking for individuals in this process, there are things that can be factored into this. So let's look at the type A personality. So if you look at the type A personality, here is a little test that you can take. 1, strongly disagree, 7, strongly agree, to determine, are you a type A personality? One of the things that we found, studies have shown that for people who are type A personalities, they are high driven. In military, we call them high-speed individuals, but the problem is it's also related to high stress as well. But this is actually shows you something. And also these people who are type A personalities at a risk for cardiac issues, health-related issues down the road. See, the average score is 60. So somebody who scores a lot above that stuff, that's grounds for concern. Why are some employees more stressed than others? Okay, so when we look at this, we see type A behavior. Again, we see the physiological, psychological, and behavioral. You see stress. The reason some people handle it better than others is those two things down at the bottom. It's called recovery and social support. Recovery is what we refer to as when you're able to get a break from that stress and get a breath of fresh air, get some rest and relax and recover before your next stressful day or your next stressful event. So if you actually have that, then that helps you. If you have social support, meaning you have individuals that's helping you with this, whether it be helping you with work or helping you, to talk about it or any number of things, those can determine why some people handle it better than others, because there would be some people that they would have very little recovery and no social support. So realistically, they leave one stress, even one stressful day, and come back and stressful day, stressful day, stressful day. At some point, that will manifest in some type of issue. It could be physiological or mental. But at some point, that's when either the mind or the body starts to break down if they don't get that recovery without the social support. But this is why some people can handle it better than others. How important is stress? Stressors and stress process influence strains and ultimately people's health and well-being. That's what we just discussed. Stresses also have an impact on job performance and organizational commitment. So whether or not somebody's excelling at the job and their commitment to the organization, stresses can play a role in that. So if we look here, we see effects of hindrance stresses on performance. Hindrance has a negative effect on job performance. So this is basically things that are hindering, getting in the way, which doesn't allow people to do their job to the level that they would like to. So it affects that. Hindrance has a negative effect, but when you look at it, you see it has a strong effect on organizational commitment, which is green. It has a not so strong connection to job performance. So realistically, what you're talking about, if somebody continues to have these types of hindrances, these stresses, that's somebody possibly that may ultimately leave your organization. Now, when we look at the challenge stressors, so you see that there's a weak correlation between challenge stressors and job performance, but there's a moderate correlation between challenge stressors and organizational commitment. Here again, you got someone that's probably not in the best space when it comes to their commitment to the organization because of these different stressors. Application stress management. So when we look at stress audit assessments, the level and sources of stress, reducing stresses, managing hindrance stresses, improving work-life balance through job sharing. So when you're looking at trying to come up with ways to manage these, it's to reduce them, managing hindrance stresses. Find out what the hindrance stresses are at work. And as a leader or if you're as an entrepreneur, you want to relieve those, remove those. Those are usually hindrance. A lot of times is something that man put in, man can take out. Improving work-life balance through job sharing and sabbaticals. You have organizations now where you actually have two people doing one job. Now, that's not two people doing two part-time jobs. That's two people doing one full-time job. And you'll find that if it's a 40-hour work week, you find one that'll work 20 hours, the other work 20 hours. But it's equivalent to having one employee. So you're still getting 40 hours of work, but you get two people that's actually doing it. In some instances, you found some organizations have found this to be very, very successful to help them. And you normally see it at lower levels or mid levels. You don't see it as high levels within organizations that much, but they have been known to do that. And sabbaticals, you find in different organizations now who are willing to pay for sabbaticals. A sabbatical is a break from work. Some organizations, there's one organization out there, I think it's Google, after 10 years, they'll give you up to 6 months paid sabbatical for you to go out there and just work on yourself or do volunteer work or teach or things along those lines. Application stress management. So it provides resources, training, interventions, supportive practices such as flex time, on-site childcare, reducing strains. So you see providing these resources, reducing strains, relaxation techniques, cognitive behavior techniques, health and wellness program, employee assistance programs. These are things that organizations are now offering that they didn't offer before. Training intervention, supportive practices such as flex time. What flex time means is you could say, I'm going to work 40 hours a week, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to work a couple of days, longer days, so I can be off every other Friday. But in the course of the 2-week pay period, you're still working 80 hours. But you have a couple of days in there where you're working extra hours so that you can be off one day. That's flex time. You're seeing on-site childcare is something that's very important. In some organizations, they're setting up spas and locations within their facility where you can do relaxation techniques, cognitive behavior techniques, health and wellness to get massages and things along those lines. And just about everybody has employee assistance programs. This is where if you have people, you see them, they may be struggling and they have stress on them. and they may need something more than just talking to the manager. You may refer them to the employee assistance program, where they meet with someone in HR, and that person may refer them to someone if they need counseling or something along those lines. But these are things that you putting out there for stress management to help to reduce the stress of employees and to hopefully keep them longer in the workplace. So when you look at supportive practices used by organizations, so look at this. We see flex time, part-time telecommuting, compressed work schedule, bring child to work if needed, full-time telecommuting, lactating program, on-site childcare, company-supported childcare centers. These are things that 30 years ago, half of these things would not be up there. These are things now that organizations are finding that it is good business to invest in their people, to do these kinds of things, to help them with stress, and to offer them perks and stuff so that they will stay longer versus constantly having people come and go, but having people burn out, leaving because they're burnt out. These are some of the things that they put in place so that wouldn't happen. So that concludes chapter 5.